Hey, this is Brandon McManus, Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion, and you're listening to The Scoop on OwlScoop.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop. This is Season 5, Episode 36, the Brian Westbrook episode. That's for Graham. Not like I'm an Eagles fan, but Sam Cohn's a lost Patriots fan. His whole team is just flying south down to Tampa. We are back to bring you the next episode of our OwlScoop.com podcast. Sam Cohn is with us. Graham Foley is with us. Sam Newman could not make it. Kyle Gauss is still missing. Being a father, I think he's moving this week. He's got a lot going on. And with us this week, and I know people are excited to hear from him because we have what seems to be about 48,000 mailbag questions. Ari Rosenfeld, the co-founder and scouting director of Elite High School Scouting and the Delaware Valley Hoops Report, is with us. Ari, what's going on, man?
Nothing much, Johnny. Just quarantined like everybody else, making the best of this.
We are all over the tri-state area. Ari's quarantined in Cherry Hill. Graham is quarantined in Downingtown, where I spent my formative years. Sam still not far from me down in Berwyn, right? You haven't gone home yet.
Tuesday I head home.
You head home on Tuesday back to Massachusetts. So Sam's in Berwyn right now, and I'm in Havertown. So we're all over the place. But we are going to bring you a lot of this. Is going to be a basketball-heavy episode. Ari knows recruiting and knows how to evaluate talent very well. We've had him on the Scoop before. Always a pleasure to talk to him. And so I know a lot of you have. We'll get to your mailbag questions in a second. That's going to be a big part of the episode this week. We know that Temple has their 2020 class pretty much firmed up by the time that you guys listen to this. I would imagine that Jeremiah Williams from Simeon High School out in Chicago will have committed by then. And if Nate Pierre-Louis does return to Temple like we expect, then that should square out the roster at 13. And now it's off to the 2021 class and some of the other players that Temple's looking at in 2021 and beyond. But we've got some questions for Ari here. Got some other mailbag questions. We'll talk a little bit of football. Sam Newman has a story up now that you can check out on the site. Also should mention to all of you who are listening to the Scoop that we are running a 60-day free trial for new OwlScoop subscribers. If you follow us on social media, there's a link there that you can sign up for. A lot of premium content on the site right now, a lot of recruiting stuff. When we have recruiting updates and Scoop to pass along, we usually will put stuff on the message board first. But getting back to Ari, our guest this week. Ari, we've had you on the show before. I'm familiar with the work that you do, and people in the region are familiar with the work that you do. But for those who don't know you and don't know your work, tell our listeners about how you got into this, what the Delaware Valley Hoops Report is, what Elite High School Scouting is, and just how you got into this and the background of everything.
So I'll get started, I guess, with what Delaware Valley Hoops Report is. Rolls off the tongue like always. DVHR for short.
DVHR. Sounds like a hospital.
Yeah. There's a reason, I'm more so my own brand than DVHR is.
Mm-hmm.
So Delaware Valley Hoops Report is an NCAA approved scouting service covering the Philadelphia area, the greater Philly area. So Philly, South Jersey, Delaware, and then out into like central PA, like the Harrisburgs, Reddings, Allentowns, sort of everything you'd call southeastern PA. And so I sell scouting reports on players and prospects from this area to colleges all over the country. So the big 5 schools all the way out to West Coast, and then from levels, from high major all the way down to Division III. So that's what DVHR is. And kind of how I got into this was, as long as I can remember, basketball obsessed. Going back, literally when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. Always knew I wanted to do something with basketball. Started going a little bit down more like a journalism path with City Basketball Love was my first official position with any website or publication or anything like that. And then sort of around the time I was getting into college and actually going through journalism school at the time, Just realized like I kind of wanted to be a little bit closer to the actual game, less sort of writing about what was happening and more sort of analyzing why or how, it was happening on the court. And that kind of brought me more into scouting. Did a couple sort of freelance positions here and there with some different entities, and then ended up starting Del Valle Hoops Report on my own about 3 or 4 years ago, and then branched that off within the last like year or so. Started a separate, more national service covering like elite level kids. Hence the name Elite High School Scouting for NBA teams. So that's kind of my journey, how I got here, and what I do.
All right, can you give us some insight into how you rank, how you evaluate players, and what goes into that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, there's no manual or science to it. It's definitely more of an art than anything else, and like anything, it's subjective. We're not always right, we're not always wrong, and sometimes like value in a player can kind of lie in the eye of the beholder. But I mean, so my kind of personal process and philosophies, I mean, the first things you look for, are sort of like the obvious physical measurables, and the stuff that kind of jumps off the page. If I walk in the gym and see, a 6'5" kid, 6'6" kid, jumping out the gym and, even just in layup lines, that kind of at least draws your eye of, all right, I'm going to look and see if this kid can do anything. Not that every 6'5" kid who can jump is a really good basketball player. But you start with kind of those easy things before you get a little bit deeper. And then I'm somebody, for me, like I look a lot at skill set first, what a player can do, what it is that he's bringing to the court, and then kind of how that fits into, the echelon of college basketball. And then obviously with the NBA, I'm being much more critical, sort of hypercritical almost, because just so few guys make it to that level when you're looking at high school players. So that's, I guess a little bit of my process. But it's inexact, and one of the beautiful things about scouting, I think, is that I'm kind of feel like I'm getting better at it every time I go into the gym. So that process is constantly kind of changing and being refined a little bit.
Just a quick follow-up on that. When you look at a kid at any level, how much do you feel like you have to see of him to understand his game from your perspective?
I usually like to do at least 2 games, two full games. I'm not somebody that, like, highlights are valuable just to get a little feel for a player, but I'm not somebody that likes evaluating off of highlights. And actually I've drifted away more and more from even watching like partial games when I'm at AAU, or high school kind of jamboree settings. I like to kind of try to sit down and watch a game from beginning to end as much as possible. And yeah, usually 2 full games to really feel like I have a pretty good feel on a player, assuming that he plays pretty good minutes in those games.
All right, what's your overall view on how the coronavirus pandemic is affecting recruiting, and how has it affected your job as a talent evaluator and a scout?
I mean, as far as how it's impacting recruiting, I guess just like kind of any other business, everyone's kind of figuring this out on the fly because no one's ever experienced anything like this before. So right now, like, there's the obvious things, that the NCAA has mandated that, prospects can't be taking visits right now, during a time when normally a lot of kids would be either seniors would be visiting schools and then committing, or juniors would be getting some visits in before their AAU season. None of that can happen right now. Obviously now, this past weekend would have been the April live recruiting period, which is the first time that coaches would be able to get out and see kids since the high school season, and the first of, a few periods they could see them in AAU. That would have been this past weekend and this weekend, and that's now been canceled. So those ripple effects are huge, where kids in the 2021 class who we're going to talk about aren't really getting their chance to be seen like they would be this weekend. Normally you're seeing thousands of offers thrown out across the country this weekend and next weekend. Kids can't be taking visits, so you have kids and programs either waiting until hopefully some of this clears down, and visits can kick back up, or you have kids who are committing kind of sight unseen or doing Zoom visits with coaches. That's definitely been something that's kicked up that no one had ever done before, really. So the ripple effects are pretty big, and I think you're going to keep seeing them for years to come. I mean, eventually, like, you see everyone talks about how big the transfer portal gets, but when all these kids are committing without being able to visit a school, imagine what it's going to be in a couple of years. So I still think like we won't see all the ripple effects from this in a couple years when you see the budgets next year and the year after. The lack of exposure for kids. It's had you can't overstate the effect that this has all had on recruiting. Obviously, pales in comparison to the world at large, but it's basically turned things upside down right now.
Yeah, all right, quick follow-up on that before we start diving into what Temple could be doing in the 2021 class. Are you in a position now where do you start to hear from the kids that you cover, the kids that you evaluate, like if they haven't seen a campus before, now that they're going through this just like the coaches are, do you ever have a kid come to you and say, hey, I had a Zoom call with a coach. What do you think? Where do you think I can go? Do they kind of lean on you sometimes and say, hey, do you think I can play at that level? You've talked to this coach or that coach. Do you find that they might be starting to lean on you right now and saying, I can't get to this place? Would I like Syracuse? Would I like this region of the country? Do they start going to you now a little bit based off of what you've seen? Is that one of the things that kind of comes out of this?
Yeah, definitely a little bit. And honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to work with kids directly and work with families directly. That's not anything I get, paid for or anything. Just kind of comes with the gig and something that I enjoy. But yeah, I mean, you kind of build relationships with these kids over the years. They see you at your games, talk to them afterwards. And they do come to see me as somewhat of an authority or just certainly somebody with some knowledge. Some kids more than others, obviously, and some you build close relationships than with others. So yeah, I mean, I get some of those questions. It's frankly less so with the kids of like, what would I think of Syracuse, and more so it's the kids of what would I think of Bloomsburg or Cal PA. Things like that where kids are choosing a school just as much as they're choosing a basketball program. They're not necessarily going to be pros. So yeah, I do get some of that right now, and probably a little bit more so with the lack of visits. And the lack of being able to necessarily be at a game and know, oh yeah, this head coach was at my game every single day, or was at every single one of my games. Clearly he's the one that really wants me. Kids aren't able to kind of get that type of feedback. So they will kind of come to me to sort of cut through, kind of some of the some of the lingo or language that they might not be understanding.
Yeah. So when it comes to Temple, they have, as of now, we would say they have 3 scholarships to offer the 2021 class, assuming things play out like we think they will with the 2020 class. I think we could safely say that maybe their top 2 local targets would be Stevie Mitchell from Wilson High School. I feel like you were one of the first people to really kind of be on Stevie. You've been telling me, I feel like for at least a couple of years, how much you liked him, liked his game. And then Zach Hicks over at Camden Catholic got closer to you. And then maybe that third person would be Sam Ayomide, the 6'9" center from the Phelps School at Malvern. You think it's fair to say that those might be Temple's 3 top prospects? And I was hoping you could kind of give us your own scouting report on each of those guys.
Yeah, definitely as far as guys in the area. I don't know, we do, we've designated when I've been on in the past, but I'll say like Temple does have some offers out to some other 2021 guys more nationally who I just haven't seen or covered nearly as in depth. So when I'm speaking, it's mainly on the local guys. Mm-hmm. Not quite there where Temple's recruiting the guys in my elite NBA service yet, maybe one day. But so I'm talking about the local guys mainly right now. So yeah, definitely locally, I would say those 3 are the ones who have kind of emerged as guys who, Temple's really high on, and also those guys are showing some interest back towards Temple. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's been some other offers out there that I think, for whatever reason, both sides have kind of gone their separate ways.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe one other name that's not on there is, but I do think they're still recruiting, is Marcus Randolph from Archbishop Wood.
Okay.
Who just kind of like
I can never get a handle on how much they like them or don't. I mean, he's a solid player. That's interesting. I guess he is still in the mix there. People have asked me about him, and I haven't known what to say. So you think they're still in the mix and recruiting him?
Yeah, definitely. From everything I've heard, I mean, he had he's kind of the forgotten piece between his team with Archbishop Wood. There's 3 other or 4 other juniors who are Division I. Rasul Diggins is kind of the top dog in the city right now, so he gets a lot of the shine. And Marcus just transferred in there this past year, so there's a little bit of a feeling out period, and then he goes and plays a team final in the summer. With Jalen Duran, Justice Williams, Nana Njoku, Rasul Diggins again, all his Wood teammates. Right. So yeah, I mean, he gets overlooked a lot, but it's definitely a guy that I believe Temple's still recruiting, and could be a good player at their level. But we'll talk. We'll talk first about the guys that you brought up. Stevie. As far as my scouting report, you mentioned he's been a guy like for a couple years now, going back to he was playing with Team Final Red out Reading, Harrisburg area. He's a scoring guard who I think will end up playing on the ball, sort of like a new age point on ball guard, where he's looking to beat his man one-on-one. And then once he does that, he'll make the right play, whether that's to go score for himself or to drop off to a teammate. He has very good vision. I think he makes other guys around him better. He really carried that Wilson Westlawn team a pretty long way to where they might have been the favorites to win the state championship in the big school division 6A before obviously COVID shut that down. And that's a team with maybe 2 other college basketball players on it. So he definitely lifts up the guys around him, and that's as much with this play as just kind of the type of kid that he is and teammate that he is. But you're recruiting Stevie to play on the ball and to go be a primary scorer for you, and I think he can definitely do that at the American level. Zach Hicks, who you mentioned for Camden Catholic, I think is a big time sleeper out of this region. I know one of the questions I think you wanted to ask later was how some of this COVID stuff is affecting Temple specifically, and I talked before about 2021 kids not being able to get exposure with the lack of live periods. I think Zach Hicks is kind of at the heart of both of those questions, where he's a kid who at 6'7", 6'8", if he'd gone out and played like he can and hit shots the way that he can, playing with Stevie Mitchell and Philly Pride, he could have easily raked in a couple high major offers and probably would have gotten some national attention, from the top 100, top 150 guys. So really the pitch with Zach is just a big shooter. Like I said, 6'7", 6'8", still really growing into his frame. Has, a little bit of an off the dribble game and some mid post scoring, but is really just a big time shooter on the wing with great size. And then Sam Ayomide also, sometimes goes by Sam Onu. There's a little bit of a disparity from when he moved up here from Texas. I think you called him 6'9". Sam's a big dude, probably even closer to 6'10", 6'11".
Okay.
And a little bit more of a project. Still really learning the game. One of those guys, it's cliche, but does sort of get better every time he plays just from going through more repetitions. But 6'11", 6'10", big body, thick 6'10", 6'11", pretty athletic, likes to play above the rim, can really rebound, can really protect the rim, finishes around, finishes inside, can post up a little bit, actually has some touch out the three. It's just kind of a matter of him getting more repetitions and getting used to the speed of the game.
Ari, you kind of alluded to this before, but does the absence of AAU basketball right now help or hurt Temple with any of these guys?
Temple's in that tough spot where they're recruiting at a high major level, but they're not in a Power 5 league. So they're always sort of on edge around this time of year are the guys that we like and we've prioritized early. The Zach Hickses and Stevie Mitchells of the world. Are they going to – Temple's always holding their breath this time of year because those guys are getting out and getting a chance to play in front of every, program in the country. And right now Temple doesn't have necessarily the name brand to be able to beat out. If a kid has 10 Power 5 offers, it's going to be hard for them to beat that out. So I think it really can only help because I do think Temple's done a good job of getting out and seeing some of these local guys early and evaluating some of these guys early. And they're in a good position, luckily, just by chance that the 2021 class around here is pretty solid. So they can fill out a good class just off local kids. So losing, the evaluation opportunities to go see other kids, I don't think hurts them as much as it would some other schools. And it helps them because the kids like Zach Hicks don't, get to go out and show, hey, I'm a 6'8", shooting wing for every high major who's looking for a big shooting wing to be able to go see that and maybe prioritize him.
Ari, you mentioned the coronavirus having long-lasting effects on high school recruiting. What do you expect to change at the end of this in AAU basketball and just high school basketball overall? And are you hearing anything in particular from people in your industry about that?
As far as, kind of lasting effects or things that are kind of going to be, kind of patchovers right now? What do you mean?
I would say both. What have you hearing just about what's going to happen immediately to kind of fix these things, but what do you think could also be more long lasting?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in the immediate, I mean, it's a lot of just kind of scuttle right now. Like, I don't really think there's anybody that really knows what's going to happen, because no one knows what direction I think the virus is going to take in our country. Where if the NBA can't even figure out yet how to play, I certainly don't think, some of the geniuses involved in AAU are going to figure it out before Adam Silver and, and his brain trust. So I think everyone is still sort of playing it by ear. I mean, more and more people I talk to seem to think that there's not going to be any basketball necessarily through July on the grassroots level. It's just so hard. I mean, when you think of an AAU tournament, if you guys have ever been to anything like that, to make that happen without it being like basically a huge public gathering is almost impossible. And so I just really don't see it happening. And then you get into liability with kids being involved and travel and all that. I just can't really see it happening. I'd say the most likely scenario actually is, and this is just pure opinion and conjecture on my part, is some type of September AAU live period, which I've actually been doing on the girls' side for years. And I think they might have to put something like that in for this year, just to try to make up some of the exposure for these kids who are going to be at a big time loss. As far as anything long term, I mean, it's hard to say. There's nothing to draw from, because nothing like this has ever happened before. I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be monetary, where you're going to see some of these low end major schools. They're still feeling the effects of this 3-4 years down the line in their budgets from the lost revenue. So I think it's going to be a lot of things like that. I'm not sure necessarily anything huge will change in like the AAU scene. I would hope that you might see some kids sort of just valuing the opportunity of having a scholarship anywhere a little bit more, whether that's the level they want, or it's not, or it might be junior college, like just the value of having those options. Because in a time like this, being able to have even just one option of a full scholarship is a whole lot better than having none, because there's no one out there who can see you right now and fall in love with you. So I would hope maybe that could be something that would stick a little bit. But honestly, I can't necessarily even say I expect that, kids who are 15, 16 right now, when they're deciding in a couple years that they're really going to think back on this and necessarily process that way. So, hopefully there's no negative long-term impacts from this, and we can all kind of move on in the next year or so, but we'll see.
Ari, we said earlier in the podcast that people love recruiting coverage, and it's been proven here is probably the most mailbag questions we've had. We get a lot each week, but there are a lot here. People always love the what's next aspect of sports. So we've got a lot of mailbag questions that we'll get to here for you. A couple are from Twitter. A lot of them are from our owlscoop.com message boards. Again, these are screen names I'm reading from. First one comes from West Coast Owl. Question for Ari. What is the most ideal / realistic 2021 class for Temple with 3 spots to give?
I mean, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but honestly, I'll go with the 3 guys you just named.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they could get Stevie Mitchell, Zach Hicks, and Sam Onu to sign today, or they can't sign today yet, but commit today and shut down their recruitments, I think Temple would be perfectly happy with that as their class and move on and move on to 2022 and beyond. He said ideal, unrealistic. I think all 3 of those guys are definitely realistic targets. Obviously, Stevie right now is going to be the biggest fight, where he's got Stanford and Marquette, Miami just offered him. So he's got some of those schools at that level already. Even though I know he does definitely hold Temple in pretty high regard. And then Zach, they're still kind of, I think, the lead dog for him as far as schools at a pretty high level that are recruiting him. And Sam, he's in their backyard. They've done a lot of work with him. I definitely know he's a fan of the program. So I think all 3 of those are very realistic, and I think Temple would be really happy to just call out their class. You get a guard, a wing, and a big, and you move on to 2022.
It's funny you say that, because Sam is quite literally in my backyard. I can see where his house is from over here, looking out of my backyard.
They had a Sam, and then Sam's roommate and the people he lives with is actually John Camden.
Yes, exactly. I went to school with the Camdens.
Yep. Okay. So you want to wave over and tell the Camden and Sam I say hello.
Will do.
Next question comes from, against another screen name from our message boards, D Thomas 96. Ari, thank you for joining. A few questions for you. Number one, what has been the perception of Temple hoops in the recruiting / AAU world now that Aaron McKie has taken over? We'll start with that one, and I'll get to the second one. I'll let you answer this piece by piece. So,
Okay.
Let's tackle that first one. What has been the perception of Temple hoops in the recruiting / AAU world now that McKie has taken over?
I think more than anything, it's sort of gotten rid of that air of uncertainty that existed kind of for the year before, where it was Fran and Aaron, especially in the recruiting in the AAU world. They were both out there recruiting, and it left a little bit of, if you weren't in the area and didn't know exactly what was going on, there's just, sort of a mystery as to, like, what's the situation there? Oh, he's still on, but he's going to be the head coach next year. There were just a lot of those questions since it was a pretty unique situation. So I think just having the stability now of, all right, like, we're here, we're no longer, it's no longer a waiting game or a holding period. I think that's definitely been a big change in perception since Aaron has taken over. And I do think they're trying to, and have succeeded in doing this, where it's a little bit of a younger, sort of fresher feel around the program. Certainly all due respect to Coach Dunphy, but he'd be the first one to tell you he's no spring chicken right now. So I think just having those sort of younger faces as the faces of the program on the recruiting scene has definitely changed some of the perception a little bit.
Second part of D Thomas 96's question: what is your honest / personal opinion about and realistic expectations of what the Temple Hoops program could be in the future?
This is the one that could get me in trouble.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'll start with, I guess, where they are right now. I mean, honestly, I think, they're in the position where they can potentially compete for tournament berths, finish in that top 3 or 4 in the American, maybe as soon as next year, or 2 years from now. I think that, this next 2021 class is really going to say a lot about, I think, kind of where the program goes for the next few years. And like I said, I think they have a chance to build a really strong class, and that can bode really well. And where they can go into the future, I mean, I do think, as much as some Temple fans might not want to hear this, that there is a little bit of a ceiling on exactly where they can go, just not being in a Power 5 or Power 6 league right now. That's just so much of what these kids are looking for these days, because more what they're looking for is to go to the pros and go to the NBA. And the way they see it is that the best way to do that is through a Power 5, Power 6 route. Whether that's accurate or not is a conversation for another day, but that's just how so many of these kids are seeing things. To where there's just, if you're not in one of those leagues, there's a perception that, you're kind of, the little stepbrother, little stepsister. So I do think there's a cap, but I don't see any reason why, with the facilities they have and sort of the people at the helm, that they can't be a consistent tournament team.
All right, just a quick follow-up to that one. This might be a real obvious question, but how much would it help them, or could it help them? Well, you and I've talked about this before. I mean, it's been a long time since they've gotten somebody into the league. There is currently not a Temple player in the NBA. Lavoy Allen was there for a little while. Marty Collins was their last first-round pick. Shiz is playing with the Blue Coats. Khalif got close. I still think the world of Khalif Wyatt as a basketball player, but everyone's been overseas and playing. Is it going to take, with you said it earlier in the podcast here, they're a group of 5 school on the outside of the Power 5, but trying to recruit at a high major level. Is it going to take them maybe getting a couple kids into the league where kids say, okay, yeah, I put Temple in the same regard as they may not be a Big East school, but yeah, look at the facilities, $10 million practice facility, 10,000 seat arena. Is it going to take a couple guys getting into the league to add some extra juice?
I mean, I'm not sure if that's a requirement, but it would, I could definitely say it would 100% help. Not even necessarily a couple kids. Sometimes really all it takes is one.
Right.
I think over the next year or two, you'll see Dayton have an uptick in recruiting.
Sure.
We're already seeing them, start to make, some lists where it'll be 4 power, a kid's top 5 will be 4 Power 5 schools in Dayton, because of the impact a kid like Obi Toppin can have on that program.
Look at what he does for his, not to take away from his brother. Look at what Jacob gets to Kentucky.
No, exactly. Or Murray State. They just landed it was a junior college kid, but a kid who was at Arkansas and had a bunch of Power 5 offers. He's going to go to Murray State. And I'm not sure you can necessarily say that before. Obviously, they had a couple pros before that, but now they just put John Morant number 2 in the draft.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it adds certainly some name recognition, some sexiness, and then it just also shows there's a proven track record. Like if, there's no way a kid can look at a program like Murray State now and say, oh, like they can gripe about the fact, oh, the only reason I didn't get to the league is because I was at Murray State, when they can just say, all right, well, this kid was at Murray State for 2 years and made himself a top 2 pick. So I think definitely that stuff will help, combined with the fact that you have a guy like Aaron at the helm who also lived that, who went to Temple, especially a Philly kid, came to Temple, was an unheralded guy when he came to Temple and worked his way into the NBA and had a long career. So I think when you have a guy like that selling it at the top, and you have a track record recently of having, sort of a proof of concept, I think it can definitely help and be a huge boon kind of going forward.
Next question here. This is a screen name from the message board. What to you? For Ari, what does he think about the move for Temple to go to Nike? I guess he's asking, what do you think about it? Do you think there's a recruiting impact there?
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing where I'm torn of like, do I think this should necessarily have an impact? It really shouldn't.
Right.
But do I think it will? Honestly, like it can only help. Not to make this a Nike ad, but I mean, I'm wearing a Nike hoodie right now. I mean, these kids love Nike and they look at Nike as the best. And if you're not wearing Nike, the first question or the first place their head goes is, you're not wearing Nike because Nike doesn't want you. And that trickles down all the way to where these kids go to high school, where they play their AAU basketball. You're seeing more and more kids drift to the Nike circuit every year, quite simply because I wish it wouldn't happen, but you're seeing kids drift towards it because they want to wear Nike stuff instead of Under Armour stuff or Adidas stuff. So I think it can only help. And frankly, I do think it will help. Will it ever push them over a top for a kid? You'd hope not. But just in some of the perception and even just subconscious stuff, I think it'll help them.
Ari, next question's from Temple J. Who are the top big men in the area, and does Temple have a realistic opportunity to receive a commitment from any of these big men?
So we talked about Sam Onu, or Sam Ayomide. He moved up to the area this past year he was in Texas, even though he's originally actually from Nigeria. So he goes to the Phelps School. He's one of the top bigs in the area, legit, mid plus to high major level kid. And we talked about Temple having a pretty realistic shot with him. Taquan Woodley from Camden is a little different than Sam, a little bit more undersized, but elite level shot blocker and rebounder, and pretty good passer and just kind of glue guy as well. And then I don't want to be forgetting anybody in 2021, but I'll move. Nana Njoku just committed to Villanova from down at Sanford in Delaware. So obviously Temple's not going to have a shot with him. He's off the board. And then in 2022, there's a really good group of bigs. There's one who's just now going to be leaving the area is Jalen Duren, who I'm sure pretty much anybody who follows basketball at this level to be listening to this podcast is familiar with Jalen. Top 2 or 3 prospect in the country as a sophomore. He's going to go to Montverde Academy next year, leaving Roman Catholic. Derek Lively is a 7-footer out of West Town who's got a chance to be a pro one day. I'd say he and Jalen are both probably unrealistic for Temple right now. They're going to be top 20, 30 guys in their class. Derek and Jalen, top whatever, will be able to go and make a lot of money right out of high school, where whatever he wants to do. So yeah, I mean, those are probably the top group of bigs. Obviously, Philly's a little bit more of a guard-oriented style of play around here. So you're always going to have more guards, but those would be the top bigs, and the guys in the junior class, I'd say, Sam Ayomide is probably the most realistic one to look at for Temple.
Next question comes from the screen name Esther Boyer. Are there any under the radar, under recruited players in the area that you think can immediately contribute at the next level, either at Temple or otherwise?
I'll take it as only a Temple, because we get into or otherwise, I could do a whole podcast on just that. Yeah, I mean, as far as a little bit under the radar kids, I mean, Marcus Randolph is one. who we talked about, has a Temple offer and has had, and a couple other offers at that level, or A10 mid-major. But this doesn't really get talked about and gets forgotten about a lot. And I definitely think can make an impact at Temple. He's a 6'4", 6'5", pretty bulky, creative guard. So can play off the ball. That's the part that people don't see from him at Wood as much, because the people playing next to him is what he can do on the ball, creating shots, and then is just a knockdown shooter off the ball. And those guys are valuable. Another guy who I know the staff has had some kind of conversations about, and hasn't been able to see as much, is a kid named Aaron Lemon Warren from Archbishop Ryan. Hasn't been able to see him as much because he broke his foot about midway through the season when he was averaging about like 26 a game, leading the Catholic League. I think maybe even leading the city in scoring. It's like a 6'5" kind of tweener forward who just really weird, unique game, but is just super productive and effective. He's got offers from like St. Louis, Bowling Green, schools at that level right now, and I know Temple's done a little bit of homework on him. And he's a kid, I'm really anxious to get back out and see, because I didn't get a chance to see Ryan before he got hurt. I actually saw them coincidentally, like the game right after was the game I was planning to see them. So I think he's going to have a chance once he gets back onto the scene to kind of prove himself as an American Conference level player.
Next question here, another screen name from our message boards, North Broad. How do less reputable scouting services hurt a legitimate service like yours?
We won't name any names here, but like anything, there are, there's the trustworthy brands and the ones that aren't. As somebody who likes to put myself in the former category of being trustworthy, you try to just kind of let the other stuff slide, and sort of my philosophy is, just as a human, is focus on what I'm doing and control what I can control. And sort of let everyone else do the same, and kind of let everyone else go on their merry way. So if anything, like I'd say that less reputable services, they hurt me because they cause me to waste some time. If a coach gets a call from a kid of, hey, this kid's your level, you got to go see him and you got to offer him tomorrow, and it's a kid who's 3 levels below that, then I got to waste some time hearing from that coach and explaining to him why this kid's not his level. But otherwise, I'd kind of just live and let live, and let whatever a less reputable service kind of operate as they will, and do my own thing.
Next question from the screen name Vanter. What is it about Temple that hasn't resonated with top end talent over the last decade plus? Is it the staff or is it something else?
I'd say it's a combination of factors. John talked about, we just talked a little bit before about, not having that track record of guys in the pros. And certainly, within that time period, the last decade that the question referenced, like that's just been a huge thing that these prospects are focusing on more and more, is college isn't the goal. It's all right, like what's going to get me to the pros. And Temple just doesn't have that track record of having done that. I'd say that's the biggest thing, honestly. They also haven't been winning as much over the last decade as they have in the history of the program. And like anything, winning talks and winning speaks. So I think if you're able to, and those two go hand in hand, is a good part. So if you're able to, put a kid in the league and make a couple tournaments in a row, I think that's going to resonate more than anything.
We've now got a pretty long-winded question from DBlaze75 on the message boards. Question for Ari. You are Aaron McKie. He wants to win a national title for Temple. As a scouting/recruiting analyst, put yourself in his shoes. How would you recruit/build this program? I think we all know top recruits are not coming into the program right away. So how do you recruit in the short term to get W's and make a run in the tournament with transfers, JUCO, high school, etc.? And what does this lead to in recruiting in the long term? How would you do it and succeed at attaining his goal?
Yeah, like you said, that's definitely a long-winded one.
It's a lot better.
I'm definitely not Aaron McKie, as anybody who's ever met me would tell you. We look nothing alike. All right. So in this hypothetical, how how would I recruit and build the program? I mean, it would start with, like, I know, there's some other questions in here, about what Aaron's brand of basketball is going to be. And that stuff you guys would probably know better than I would necessarily. But, he's going to want some long, athletes, wants to play up tempo, wants to pressure the ball. I guess that's, that's the surface level stuff I can speak to. So if I were in that boat, I mean, I would be making sure to be recruiting to that model right now, recruiting guys that fit into that, both stylistically on the court and then also culture-wise off the court, fitting, bringing guys that fit your culture, not necessarily reaching for the guy who might be a little bit more talented right now, but is going to throw off the locker room. I think that can do a lot more harm than good at times like this. And then, it was mentioned in the question as far as you might have to get a little bit creative at first, getting in there with some transfers like they've done, maybe going the JUCO route. I think is probably the most, I should say, the least efficient market right now in recruiting, where you're able to get kids who you probably shouldn't be able to get talent-wise out of the JUCO ranks, more so than in high school and more so than with transfers. So I think the biggest thing is to get a team on the court through those ways, kind of creatively, that can get into a tournament. And obviously, the goal would be to win a game or two in the tournament. And then I think you can really focus in on zeroing in on some higher level guys, especially some of the higher level local guys. I don't think in the interim it matters as much if they're getting local guys or out of area guys. That's the goal first. It needs to be to win. But then I think your best bet to get higher level talent is going to be to get local guys, who want to stay home and represent Temple and represent a city school. So I think that would be a little bit of the roadmap. Obviously, like, there's a whole lot more than that goes into this if I were actually Aaron McKie. But that would, I guess, kind of be the basic roadmap.
There's one here from Twitter, Ari, @ZMcClellan is the Twitter handle. Will the potential end of the one and done era in 2022 significantly impact college basketball? Will the impact be minimal on the whole, as only a small percentage of the players will be NBA prospects at a high school? Has an impact been seen already in terms of scouting middle school and high school players?
So, first off, I don't think the one and done is going to end in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me that a year ago, I probably would have said the opposite.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit, right?
Yeah. At this point, things are just kind of moving slowly. Like, not that I'm in tune with necessarily NBA, CBA talks, and obviously all this COVID stuff has thrown that all for a loop. But people who are in tune with that stuff are saying it probably, it's not even on the table right now. And so it might be not until 24, 25, when the new CBA is up, that might be something that's brought back to the table. But whether the one and done ends or not, you're now seeing this new G League path, and more and more ways every year for guys to do something in the interim before they can go to the draft besides playing college basketball. So I kind of take it that way, where we'll go one and done and just call that all its own thing. So as far as the impact it'll have, like you said, I think it'll be pretty minimal overall, in terms of numbers. A conference like the American maybe won't even, it's not going to have any impact. I know right now the G League is looking to target really only 5, 6, 7, 8 guys a year. They're not looking for top 50 kids. They're looking for, one and done lottery picks, for this new program of theirs. So obviously, like, is that at the surface level of college basketball, are you going to lose some fans who, maybe just want to watch Zion Williamson, or maybe just want to watch, Jalen Green, who's going to the G League now instead of college? Sure, but I don't think that's going to have a huge impact on, like, the bottom line or necessarily, the product on the court if those guys aren't there. And the impact it's seen already, from a scouting perspective. It's really just what we talked about, less in terms of actual, like, scouting and evaluating players. But just, being in that world and in that industry, the big change you've seen is just more and more of these kids sort of looking past college and more so focusing on what their pro aspirations are, and then kind of whether it's going to be college or some other means it's going to help them get there. But college is really just part of, what one of those options is a means to that end of going pro.
All right, this one comes from Mission Man. Ari, good luck with all you and Delaware Valley Hoops Report are doing. And this might be an easy question. Do any of the ranking entities like Rivals, Yahoo, Max Preps, and/or media outlets / publications retain your services, consulting or package-wise, or is it mostly college basketball staffs?
It's just college basketball staffs. That's an easy one. Those other guys, are all kind of on my side of the business. So they're doing things from their own vantage points. And honestly, a lot of the guys that are doing the national sites for Rivals or for 24/7, ESPN, whatever it is, whatever it may be, they all have scouting services on their own as well for the most part. So we're all, we're all colleagues, but we're all colleagues, not that they're clients and I'm a vendor of theirs.
The screen name TU Owls Fan 2004. Who are your biggest basketball influences in your journey and how you see the game, etc.? What have they taught you?
That's a really good question. I'd say one that's sort of been more illuminated recently, I guess unfortunately, that I never had kind of been able to put into words necessarily before was how big an influence Kobe Bryant was. On my just kind of basketball journey overall, really sort of as the inspiration that ignited that journey. For people who know me, I grew up a huge Kobe fan and Lakers fan as a result. And it was just something about like his passion for the game and it's cliche now, but like that Mamba mentality of his, seeing that even at just like 6-7-year-old, you didn't know the words for it, but you could just it resonated with me and sort of instilled that same love and passion for the game in me. So I think from an outside perspective, no one shaped sort of my journey in basketball more than Kobe from an early standpoint. And then more sort of more direct contacts. Honestly, Coach Dunphy would be one of those people, as well as Phil Martelli. Just both guys who, when I was first getting into this, obviously were Big Five head coaches, but always went out of their way to just be warm and courteous and welcoming. Whenever I would see them out on the scene, now I'd kind of feel lucky to consider friends and mentors at this point. So they both taught me a lot, and just their acceptance early on was a huge influence for me, to feel confident going and talking to other coaches. This coach just saw me coming from talking to Phil Martelli or to Fran Dunphy. He's going to know to give me the time of day. So they were both huge influences. And I do just also want to kind of give a nod to a couple professional influences, Brian Flynn and Eric Hamford. Both guys I met early on in the process, both actually now working for Made Hoops together. Other scouts, recruiting analysts who kind of brought me in when I was making that transition from the journalism side over to scouting. They kind of brought me in and really showed me the ropes, just kind of how to move and how to navigate, the pretty crazy world of recruiting and grassroots basketball. And then Andrew Slater as well has kind of taken on that role, especially now that I've been moving into doing some more of the pro stuff recently. Has really helped me a lot doing the same thing. So I'd say that's kind of the list as far as influences. I hope I didn't forget anybody or leave anybody out, but I guess one of the beautiful parts of what I do is just every basketball conversation I have is some kind of influence and is shaping the way that I see the game, or even if it's just puts me deeper into my opinions or makes me see something differently. That's all influential.
Got another one here from the message board, Ari, and a couple other ones I wanted to ask you. This one from SAH0770, another screen name from our Owl Scoop message board, basketball board. Can you compare Stevie Mitchell to Rasul Diggins? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on why you think McKie has offered Mitchell but not Diggins. And I get this one a lot.
Yeah, so honestly, they're similar players. A little bit different stylistically, but in terms of like, they're both guys who are going to play on the ball, but both guys who are really going to look, probably score first, pass second. And sort of that new age mentality. Stevie's a little bit bigger than Rasul's a little bit bigger than Stevie, I should say. Rasul's probably almost 6'3", Stevie probably almost 6'2". I think Stevie is still a little bit, he's younger. They're in the same class. He's almost a year younger though. And just a little bit younger in his development, where he hasn't been battle tested in the same ways as Rasul has, but also hasn't had the chance to kind of refine his game and in the same way that Rasul has. Stevie never played on a sneaker circuit before last year, and plays out in Wilson where he's playing. It's a far cry from the Philly Catholic League that Rasul's played in. As to why the offers out to Stevie and not to Rasul at this point, Rasul's got 15, 20 high major offers. So I think some of it is a little bit of just a kind of a time allocation and resource management decision where they're not going to invest a bunch of time in recruiting Rasul when, like we talked about earlier, the chances of landing him even as a local kid over 15, 20 high major schools is just really slim, no matter how much time you invest in it. So I'd say at this point, like that's probably the main reason. And now they've gotten this far down the road with a guy like Stevie and are going to try to beat out, maybe 2, 3, or 4 high major schools to get him. Now it looks bad if you turn around and start recruiting a guy at the same position while you're telling Stevie that he's your guy.
A couple other ones, a couple other questions I wanted to ask you here. They're not mailbag questions, but one regarding the transfer waiver thing that's coming up that they're going to be voting on next month. And as I understand it, from what I've been reading, this would not be a one-time thing. That would be to address all the chaos around the COVID-19 outbreak. So let's say the NCAA does decide that players can get a one-time waiver where they can transfer without having to sit out. Is this a good thing for college basketball? Is this a tough thing? Like a lot of people have written stuff about it. John Rothstein's, outlined his plan for it, saying it could turn mid-majors into JUCOs. It could turn the handshake line into home visits and all that stuff. What's your thought on that? Because I think a lot of us as reporters and talent evaluators or whatever will say, yeah, the players should have more power, but does it make things chaotic? Does it make things even easier for the high major programs and cause a wider gap between the haves and the have-nots?
Yeah, so kind of my thoughts on it are that both of those things can be true.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I do think players probably should have the right to go where they want to go, the same as, if Graham or Sam wanted to transfer from Temple, they'd be able to go do that and go wherever they wanted to go and pick up their studies right away and not have to wait a year or anything like that. Like I do, or the same as any, someone will say like, those guys aren't on scholarship. The same as any kid on an academic scholarship can pick up and go to another school and be eligible to get academic aid at their new school right away. So I do think there's no reason that athletes should be different, but I also do think it's going to make things really tough and cause a lot of chaos in college basketball. There's no doubt about that. Do I think it's something that probably needs to be done? I'd say at this point, it makes sense. You're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off at some point. It's going to be chaotic at first, and then it's going to become a new normal, just like anything else. And I think it's better than what we've seen the last few years of this, kind of waiver process where some kids then get to play right away and some kids don't. It's very, very seemingly arbitrary as to who gets those waivers and who doesn't. I think, if they were to pass this rule, you'd see a lot of coaches complain about it right away. Would probably favor the high major schools in the long run. But eventually, everyone would adapt and get used to it. And I think if it's what we feel is best for the kids, then it's what we should do, regardless of whether it's going to be a little chaotic in the meantime. The one thing I do, I do kind of want to make clear, the one thing that I've heard is that, and this isn't, set in stone, but what I've heard, what would make sense is that if this rule passes, it'll be not for transfers committing right now for this coming year. It would actually be for kids in the portal after, let's say like September 1st. Kids who enter the portal after like September 1st or August 1st would then be able to transfer and play somewhere right away. So all these kids committing right now in this cycle, that wouldn't necessarily apply to. No, there's one person I trust who's told me that. There's been a lot of people saying stuff to the contrary. That's the one thing that I think would be wrong and unfair, is if it changes this year, it changes this summer for next year, when you've had some schools recruiting thinking their kids are going to sit out and some recruiting thinking they're going to play right away, and just arbitrarily half of them are right and half of them are wrong because of a vote. I just don't really think that's fair. It's, kind of like changing the rules in the middle of the game.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't get a clear answer on it either. I mean, I've heard both sides of it and kind of conflicting opinions. If you're looking at Temple, if it were to pass and it would affect this year's class, and then if you're Temple, they might be able to successfully get a waiver for someone like Caleb Battle. I wanted to ask you about him too, because you saw him when he was in high school. Maybe the chances of him getting a waiver, even if this thing wasn't going on, you could say, well, he's coming closer to home. Maybe it doesn't help him with a kid like Sage Tolbert. I would imagine you haven't seen Sage play before, but it could be something that maybe goes both ways, where maybe a mid-major or a mid-major program loses a kid, but they also might be able to pluck a kid who went to Duke, Kansas, or Kentucky, who feels like he's not getting the minutes he needs at high major, and then says, I'll get 25 minutes a game at Western Michigan or Wichita State or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, like at the end of the day, like I can name you, a team of kids playing D2 ball right now, or kids playing JUCO, or kids who went to prep school because they didn't have an offer, who would run some low major programs off the court.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always there are players for these programs. There's always going to be players for these programs. It might mean that they have to work a little bit harder to find them, or get a little bit more creative as to who they're recruiting. But there are players for those schools, and like anything, I think they'll adapt. But I just think changing it in the middle of the year for this year, like you said at the top of the podcast, like 2020 class, for Temple and for a lot of schools is done. We're talking about 2021 and onward. All of a sudden at this late stage in the game, pass some rule that's going to basically apply to what, equates to the 2020 recruiting class, even though they're transfers. I just don't really think it's fair. Whereas 2021, you could do that and give schools, ample time to be able to plan accordingly.
Tell us about Caleb Battle. You saw him. We know he played, sparingly, like a lot of freshmen in the country at Butler. Transfers to Temple. I would imagine they'll pursue a waiver for him. We know that his brother was a very good player. You saw him at Trenton Catholic before he went out to Butler. If he gets eligible to play for Temple this year, what can you give them? Tell us about the type of player that you think he is.
I think the biggest thing he can bring in right away is the ability to shoot and space the floor, which I think, if you watch Temple this year, they were definitely lacking in that regard. And that's something Caleb has been able to do, forever, and will always be able to do is come in and shoot the ball. The stuff he brings around that, I think, is going to be still a little bit more of a work in process. And I think a work in progress, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I think that's some of the stuff that kept them off the court at Butler, where they had more guys who could space the floor, and more experienced guys who could space the floor. So I think he'll come in and bring that right away. And also just, he's just another kind of 6'4", 6'5", athlete with some range, and more of those guys you can put on the floor is always positive. So as far as what he could be more down the line, I think, like, if they can work on his handle, he's got some just natural scoring instincts. His skill level is going to need to catch up to that. And I think that's a little bit of what kept him off the floor at Butler, that he could work on at Temple while being able to just, still be on the court and get reps with his shot making and his athleticism.
Quick follow-up on that, about Caleb. You kind of alluded to it, but I mean, from what I've seen from him, he's much more of a spot-up shooter, a catch-and-shoot kind of guy, rather than a create for himself. What have you seen from him with the ball in his hands?
So you're definitely right. He is much more of a spot-up or transition kind of catch-and-shoot guy. With the ball in his hand, he got more reps with the ball in his hands in high school, certainly, than he did at Butler. It always felt more like he was relying on his athleticism to get to places and to score, than he was on a skill level. And I think in high school he was able to do that because he was more often than not the most athletic kid on the court. In the American, he's still definitely a plus athlete, but he's by no means like an outlier in that regard. So that's where I think you're going to have to see the skill level just kind of refine itself a little bit more. When he is on the ball, he's still looking to get to a jump shot or a version of a jump shot. He's got a little bit of mid-range, like kind of one leg fall away, stuff like that. But he really just, he's looking to create space. and get a jump shot up there, because that's really what his game is.
Assuming he can play this coming season, and I guess assuming there is a season to be played, do you think he can have more of an impact for Temple on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball?
I would say offensive, just because of how, especially specifically for Temple, how much they need that floor spacing. I know they're also counting on it, I guess Quincy Adamakoya and Dame Dunn to bring that a little bit too. I'm just not as familiar with those guys' games. But yeah, I mean, just having that floor spacing option, and I don't know exactly what Caleb's percentages were at Butler, but even like I was a little lower on him, necessarily what his recruitment was early on in his high school career. But the one thing I could never take away from him, or anyone can, is that he can really, really shoot the ball. And it's actually, it is a little bit unorthodox. He gets like a lot of elevation. It's a little bit of an unorthodox release, but he can really, really make shots. So I'd say offensively, defensively, it's always hard learning a new system. I think he struggled a little bit in that regard at Butler. And it's still just a young player. So it's always going to be hard to bank on a guy like that's defense. Although I think he could be a solid piece eventually. But yeah, I mean, offensively, I think just the floor spacing is going to be his biggest impact right away.
Or just like you were one of the first guys I feel like to really start talking about Stevie Mitchell, you were also one of the first guys to really start talking about Jaleel White, when a lot of people were, and Tosh to that extent too. Around this time last year is right around this time last year was when Jaleel got hurt, had the meniscus injury, pretty much missed the summer. And we've talked before about how maybe if he had played in the Philly Live event, he might have picked up a couple of high major offers, ends up signing with Temple. I know you're all over the place. You have to see a lot of games, a lot of teams, but what did you think of the season that Jaleel had after he got healthy with Wildwood Catholic? Again, they were only able to go so far in their high school season. They won South Jersey B, I guess, right? What did you think of the season he had? And do you think he is more of an instant impact guy at Temple this season, or do you think he's a guy that's going to come along a little bit more slowly?
Yeah, I mean, so Jaleel had a weird season in that he never totally did get healthy. And I don't, I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn or, air any of his stuff. But I know that there was definitely a feeling that he kind of rushed his way back from his knee injury that you alluded to, in hopes of getting back for the start of the season. And he did get back for the start of the season. But from what everyone around him was saying, he was just still never really 100% and had never totally gone through like all the rehab protocols that he probably should have. All that being considered, I mean, I think he had a really great year. Like you said, I mean, he and Tosh Thweed, who's going to West Virginia and was, as the people listening know, probably was a big Temple target as well. They led Wildwood Catholic into, what would have been the New Jersey State non-public B championship game. They destroyed Rutgers Prep the night before the NJ tournament was called off to win the South Jersey non-public B title. And Jaleel and Taj were 100% the driving forces of that. I mean, they were one of the better duos I think I've ever seen in South Jersey, and we'll see here for a long time. Yeah, I mean, he had a really solid season when he was healthy. Did miss some games here and there, just kind of with stuff lingering in the knee. Wasn't, necessarily as explosive as he was. You could tell that, like, he still wasn't totally comfortable kind of planning off that leg yet and exploding like he could before. But all in all, he had a successful season. I think the jump shot made strides, and ultimately that's going to be the swing as to how successful he can be at Temple is what progress he can make with his jumper. So just seeing that progress was good, and he stepped up on some big stages. I mean, overall, I think it was a solid year for him. And the second part of your question, especially with some of the uncertainty in his knee and with the injury, I would expect him to kind of come along a little bit more slowly once he's at Temple, given that they'll have Caleb, for Temple, hopefully playing right away. They have Adam McCoy coming in, and they have Damian Dunn, who sat out last year, who I know might have started some games for them if he was playing as a freshman. That kind of just gives them, a little bit of time to bring Jaleel, along slowly. If there does have to be, some more rehab done on his knee, he can take the time to do that. And that's just me speculating, not that anyone said that has to happen necessarily. And also just get him on, get him in the gym and getting reps up on his jump shot. Really concentrated and focused on that. So I think, they'll afford to be able to bring him along pretty slowly, and I think it could really pay off as an upperclassman.
All right. This has been awesome. Really, really appreciate you taking some time out. It's always good to talk to you. Hopefully, we'll actually see each other again and hang out when things get closer to normal again. So, thanks for taking all these mailbag questions. Again, always appreciate your insight, and hopefully, we can do this again soon. And hopefully, things will, like I said, get back to normal, so you can get back out there and do what you love to do.
Absolutely, Johnny. Thanks, buddy. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Ari. Again, Ari Rosenfeld, the scouting director from Delaware Valley Hoops Report, kind enough to join us. Great stuff from him. Thanks, buddy. All right, so again, a big thank you to Ari Rosenfeld. I'm a little biased because he's a good friend of mine, but he really, really knows his stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed his insight into Temple basketball, who they're recruiting, who they could be potentially bringing in the future. And hopefully, again, we'll connect with Ari down the line on recruiting stuff. Again, at the top of the podcast, near the top of the podcast, I mentioned that owlscoop.com is offering a 60-day free trial, meaning that if you sign up for the 60-day free trial, you will have premium access to all the stuff on our site, including our football message board, our basketball message board. If you're a subscriber to the site, you know that if we have reputable recruiting information, we will probably post it there first just to get some information out there, and then get stories out there for you as well. We answer reader questions there. There's some good conversation there amongst the Temple fan community, both for football and basketball. So again, if you sign up, if you follow us on Twitter at @owlscoop_com, all of us on the staff have been kind of tweeting out the link. You can even see it. Graham, did we get it on? Is it on Instagram now too?
It is on Instagram. Yeah, it's the Instagram bio right now, and I put a little promo post on the Instagram page.
Awesome. So again, if you follow us on Twitter, there's a link there. If you even follow us, if you have liked our Facebook page, we have information posted there. So it's a 60-day free trial. The promo code is Temple60. So what it means is if you're a new user, you can sign up. And again, you get premium access to the site for 60 days. That offer is valid through May 8th. So a lot of times, to bring you up to speed on this, when we do recruiting articles and they're one-on-one interviews, we'll make them premium content. If it's a one-on-one interview with like the stuff that Adam Cronali has done with Matt Hennessy, with Sean Bradley, we have a story up on the site. Last week explained to you that we played you part of our interview with Pat Kraft, Temple's athletic director, but the full interview is made available for subscribers. So even though there are no games right now, and we're certainly in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic that's hopefully going to get better, we are still doing a lot of stuff, producing a lot of content, a lot of recruiting content, getting you as many interviews as we can. So it's a great time to sign up. We'll make sure that it's worth your while. So for new users can sign up, returning users and past subscribers can sign up as well. And also, if I didn't mention this before, if you are a current OwlScoop subscriber, we have a referral program where if you refer a friend to this offer, your friend will get half off their first year of an annual subscription. And then you, as the person who successfully refers that person, will get a 2-month free extension on your own subscription. So everybody wins here. So helps us expand the site and the resources we can offer. So definitely check that out. And again, there's some stuff on the site right now that would be of interest to you. Sam Cohn talked to Trey Moss, a Rivals 150 guard from Windermere High School down in Florida. We talked a lot about the local kids. Ari knows really well, but Trey Moss is a guy that Temple obviously hasn't had the chance to see yet because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but a guy that they are recruiting. So if you read Sam Cohn's story, you can read about Trey Moss, what he thinks of Temple so far. Sam Newman has a story up on the site right now on Coleman Jeffcoat, a football player from the Charlotte area who has an offer from Temple. So there's a couple stories you can read there. Again, we have stuff up on Sean Bradley, Matt Hennessy, one-on-one interviews with them. So definitely consider giving that offer a look. And again, we always try to make it worth our while to give you as much content, as much exclusive content as we can. And if you have any feedback for us, just let us know. We have a few more mailbag questions to get to, in addition to the ones that fans had or readers and listeners had for Ari. A couple of these are football related as well. So a couple more questions for the staff. Another one from North Broad. This is North Broad's screen name from the message board. This is football related. Predict which Temple players get drafted in which rounds. We don't have the Sam Newman writes for Jets Wire, part of the USA Today network. I know Sam's a lot more locked in on mock drafts and stuff like that, but we've all covered Temple football. Of course, we're recording this on Wednesday night, so the scoop will drop. You'll be listening to this on Thursday, the day of the first round of the NFL draft. I think we're all looking forward to it. I'll kick this over to you guys. Again, this is all just speculation here. Which Temple players get drafted in which round? At Off the Hook 3 from Twitter had the same question. Who gets drafted in which round? How many others go to NFL roster? So let's kick that one around. What do you guys think?
I'll jump in real fast because you mentioned Sam Newman and how it's unfortunate that he can't be on the podcast. But lucky for you, I thought ahead, and I sent a text to Sam Newman, and I have his answer to this question as well because he's definitely very tuned in.
Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
I'll just go right to Sam. So he says Hennessy goes in the second round. He predicts to the Los Angeles Rams. He says Harrison Hand in the fourth round to the New Orleans Saints, and Sean Bradley in the sixth round to the New York Giants. He also says that Isaiah Wright and Chappelle Russell will be priority undrafted free agents. The difference, I was thinking Chappelle Russell maybe as a seventh rounder. He says his medicals are too risky there, and that's why he becomes an undrafted free agent. I don't have any disagreements with that. I think there's maybe a chance Russell goes. There's maybe a small chance that Isaiah Wright in the last round, but I think they're more likely to be undrafted free agents. And Hennessy as a second rounder would be pretty big for Temple. I think that'd be exciting for the program.
Mm-hmm. Sam, what do you think? Sam Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, Sam killed it. The only thing I would have said is from the little that I've read or what I've heard, I'd say Hennessy's probably a day two guy, but could go pretty high. And that Sean Bradley is probably more likely to go undrafted but find his way onto a roster than to get drafted. But, yeah, Harrison Hand probably in the later rounds, and Sean Bradley find his way later too.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard for me to disagree with that too. I mean, the whole draft is going to be interesting. I think that we've all read stuff about how the scuttlebutt has been interesting this year because there have been no pro days. The teams obviously have not been able to meet with guys in person. So, obviously mock drafts are based on some conversation depending on who's producing them each year. But this could be a draft this year where you look back at a mock draft and say, wow, everybody was way off, whether you're an Eagles fan, whether you're a Giants fan, a Jets fan, or whatever. So who knows how things will turn out. The one thing we know about Matt Hennessy, again, I'm not an NFL GM. Could I see him being a day two pick? Could I see him going in the second round? I could. I mean, the production's there, the intellect is there. I mean, I've had the chance to get to know Matt for 4 years. And again, the one thing that all of his teammates, anybody I would talk to about him would say is like, even after guys on the team would get in plenty of work and feel good about themselves and say, hey, I worked hard, I went to class, I went to practice, I did this, I did that. He was the guy who would still be the last guy out of the building, so to speak. So we know the intellect is there. We know the ability is there. So I could see him going in the second round. I could see Harrison Hand going, I guess maybe fourth round might be a little bit too high, but we'll see. I think the one thing where Harrison might get a little dinged on is that he's had some durability issues. Obviously, he hasn't had any major issues. He's not facing the uphill battle that Chappelle Russell has had, where he's had back-to-back ACL tears. And again, we'll see whether that lands Chappelle in the seventh round or if he has to get in as an undrafted rookie free agent. I'll probably play it cautiously and say that Pell is probably an undrafted rookie free agent. Harrison Hand, I guess I'd probably predict they'll go in the fifth round, whatever my prediction's worth. And I think that Sean Bradley's got a chance to go in the fifth round too because of his ability to be versatile. And he, ran a top 5 40 time among linebackers at the combine. So people saw him at the combine. And even Chappelle, maybe he gets drafted in the seventh round because those guys had a chance to be seen in Indianapolis and didn't have to rely on a pro day. I don't think Isaiah Wright gets drafted. Maybe guys like Dana Levine, maybe even a guy like Zach Mesday, a guy like Sam Franklin. Those are guys that are probably going to have to get, camp invitations. But yeah, I would go Hennessy second round, maybe Hand fifth round, maybe Bradley fifth round, I guess. Those will be my predictions again for whatever they're worth. Next question here. Yeah, this was another one from Fig One, screen name from the message board along the same lines for the bonus round. The teams they are drafted by, I don't know. Sam had them. If I was trying to predict where these guys would go to what teams, it would just literally just be complete.
That's the thing. I don't understand how people do that. I'm very impressed. But just to recap, it's Hennessy to the Rams, Hand to the Saints in the 4th round, Bradley to the Giants in the 6th round.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go with what Sam said. Another couple questions here. This one from Twitter at Temple Fan Al. 7 years ago, Temple football had a behind-the-scenes series with Steve Addazio. Steve Addazio, former Temple coach, who's now at Colorado State. 30-minute episodes spanning the entire season. Would that ever happen again? That was the last time we had an updated video tour of Ed Bergolson Hall, as well with Brandon McManus giving the tour. I believe Temple Fan Al is referring to, and I could be wrong, Steve used to do a weekly sit-down video with Keith Pompey when Keith was covering Temple for the Inquirer before he was covering the Sixers. If that's what he's referring to, and I think, and Graham, you can speak to it. We can all kind of speak to this. When's the next time they're going to get a show like that? Would that ever happen again? Yes, but Temple would be the one to produce it. I think that the sports media landscape has changed now where it's when you look at organizational communication, the Phillies, the Eagles, the Flyers, the Sixers, now colleges, they're creating their own content. Would we love to do a show like that? Absolutely. That would be great. But Temple's going to do it before we do because they want to tell their own story. So if you see coaches shows or behind the scenes series with Steve Addazio, they've already done stuff like that. They do their own signing day show. So I think it's going to happen if they did something like that, where it was be a 30-minute episode or a coach's show. Again, now we've been able to have a couple of sit-down interviews, one-on-one interviews with Rod Carey, which has been great. We'll continue to do that. I mentioned the 60-day free trial earlier. That's the type of stuff that we want to commit to delivering to our subscribers, whether we sit down with Aaron McKie, Rod Carey, assistant coaches, players. But I think if there is ever a return of a show like that, I think Temple's going to get they're going to get first crack at it. I don't know how you guys would feel about that. That's how I would see it playing out.
Yeah, and I would just add that, Temple definitely has the resources to do that. They have a very good video production team, and they do shows, like you said, with signing day. They're definitely able to handle that. It really just comes down to the head coach's willingness to do that. And, like you said, Rod Carey has been good to us and sitting down for interviews time to time. But that's a pretty big commitment that guys like Addazio and a guy maybe like Jeff Collins would be really into, just kind of showing off the brand and really playing up the media aspect that I don't see Rod Carey particularly doing. So I would say it's not as much on Temple's end. It's more up to the coach. And I just don't expect Rod to want to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you that it might not be up Rod's alley, but I would say that just to agree, if it's going to happen, it's going to come from Temple. I mean, they've already, I don't know if you guys have seen they've done kind of like a mini series while we've all been in quarantine of interviewing coaches and people in the athletics department, and just short interviews about just for like social media, YouTube purposes about, how they're spending their time or what it's like working and all this. So if anybody's going to do it, it's going to come from Temple and not from any media outlet.
And I think it would take a while for something like that. If we were to do it on our end, where that happens, and I'm probably telling people something that they already know, but shows like that tend to happen in bigger college sports towns, or where there's really been a lot of action on a national level. Like I can tell you, and I don't know if they still have the show, but some of the Rivals networks, some of the sites in the Rivals networks, a couple of them have their own radio shows. I know that the Rivals site that covers Miami, now granted this was a while ago when Al Golden left to take the Miami job back in 2011, the guy that runs the Miami site had his own show, I don't know if he still does, and said, hey, we want you to come on our radio show down here and tell us about Al Golden. And the show was staffed by him, a former Miami player. And I thought it was kind of interesting because, I mean, I've never lived in Miami. I've been down there. How much of a sports town it is depends on who you talk to. Some people just enjoy being outdoors. Some people were Heat fans before they got LeBron and all that stuff. It's an interesting sports town, but they had a show down there dedicated. It wasn't necessarily a coach's show, but it was a sports talk radio show dedicated to college sports. That type of thing typically doesn't happen here in Philly. We know it's pro sports all the time, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Down in Waco, Texas, they have that. When Matt Rule got down there, I was on a couple of radio shows. They want to know everything about Matt Rule. I think we're a few years away, at least from there being something like that up here. Now, again, like Ari said, if things really take off for Aaron McKie, maybe there is a weekly coaches show. We'd love to do something like that. But again, I think Temple would obviously get first dibs on it because they want to have their own content there. Another question getting us back to basketball here. This comes from Chi-Town Al. This is a question from the message board. Question for John and the team. This is a two-parter. I'll read these together because it all falls on the same lines. It has been mentioned repeatedly that Aaron wants to implement his brand of basketball, and we talked about this before with Ari. What do you envision that looking like at an optimal level, and what pieces do you think are critical to achieving this? Additionally, what team at any level currently or in the past would be a comparison to the style of play, something like 40 Minutes of Hell from back in the 90s with Arkansas, or run and gun? I'm going to say, and I obviously want you guys to chime in too, I'm borrowing a lot from what Chris Clark has said in the past. I think when we had Chris on last year on the Scoop, when we had him in person with us, I think he used Florida State as a benchmark. And I think that, I mean, they're certainly not the only team in America that has long athletic guards. But, and again, Ari mentioned some of this already, you know, Aaron wants longer guards, wants to be able to go out and get out and run, maybe post up those guards. You know, maybe a guy like Jaleel White could be an interesting player like that in the future. We've talked about Jeremiah Williams, and they see him, I believe, as a guy who can be a pack-up point guard. Jaleel can handle the ball, but he probably could post up a little bit. So I think they just want bigger guards, get out and run. I don't think Aaron wants to call a ton of plays. I think he wants to play through a few concepts on offense and let guys make decisions. And then defensively, again, like we talked about before, he wants to be able to get out, deny the ball, pressure the ball, get into passing lanes. And I think Florida State would kind of be, again, not like they're the only team that plays that way. You might even see a little bit of that, like on a lesser level, maybe like if you're looking for an American comparison, maybe like Houston. I don't know, something like that. But that's what I would see it at the optimal level, as Chi-Town Al was saying here. But again, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this as well.
I think just to speak more, I think you're absolutely right that that's kind of what they're looking for, long, athletic guys that can run the floor, handle the ball, shoot the ball, make plays, comfortable with the ball in their hands. But to the point of the second question, what team at any level currently or in the past would be a comparison to this style of play? I think you could name a laundry list of teams right now that play that way, because that's the style of basketball. That is the new age of basketball. That is where basketball is trending. The other night I was watching Temple UNC 1984 against Michael Jordan. And if you watch that Temple offense play, UNC's defense would smother them at the half court, and they'd make one pass like across horizontally and then set down screens, and they would set screens and come off. They would set off ball screens. That's not what basketball is anymore. And there are teams that play that way. There are teams that prefer to play a more slowed style of play, especially if they do have a true point guard and guys that can make plays. But I think for the most part, what they want to do, and John, you mentioned Aaron McKie doesn't want to call plays the whole game. He wants to have general sets that guys can get into have guys that understand what spots to get into, make a couple passes that kind of resemble what an offense would look like, and then to just play basketball. He wants guys with high basketball IQs to know how to just go out there and play together. And so much of that comes from an ability to be able to play with your teammates, and it takes time to get that kind of camaraderie in a locker room, or especially with so much roster attrition, it's not going to be first night out. These guys are going to be comfortable playing with each other. It's going to take time, but that's what he wants to do. He wants these guys to know and understand each other as teammates and have that kind of general outline of where guys line up on the floor, but then for these guys to play basketball, to make plays, to knock down shots, and to just get after it.
And Sam, put that in context a little bit too, because I think I'm trying to anticipate what fans say sometimes, or what the conclusion that they jump to. You played in high school. I really respect your knowledge of the game. If a fan were to hear he doesn't want to call a ton of plays, some fans kind of fly off the wheel and say, oh, that means he can't coach. Or that means he doesn't want to draw up sets. But we know that's not the case. It's not.
I got it. I understand
like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a difference between running a play and running an offense.
Right.
Prime example is the flex offense or the motion offense, where you put guys in spots, and a lot of it, the motion offense is a lot of pass and cut. The flex offense is you have guys in the corners two guys up top and a guy on the block, and essentially you're passing across, setting a down screen, and you have a motion you're going through. Both are very free-flowing offenses. If you're calling a play or you're calling specific sets, that's more, in this age of basketball, that's more for inbounds plays, because that's not the kind of, back in the day in more half-court set style basketball, that's going to get you a quick shot. And offenses have grown or developed to create ways where if you don't get a jump shot off that first, second, even third option, you can do more and you can know where to keep going. When I would practice the motion offense growing up, we would run it, and you would just run it like for 10 minutes straight without shooting the ball. You would just keep passing and keep running through, because it's the kind of thing where you could do continuously. Whereas a play is more so, having guys in specific spots that move specific ways to get that first or second option, and then you're done. And there's not really much to go off of that. So he wants to have a general offense that he can say, do this, but for the most part, he wants guys to walk up the floor and, kind of understand what a defense is doing, understand how to react to it. We talked so much this past season about Temple can't seem to figure out how to work a zone. Temple can't seem to figure out how to make passes into the interior and work against a 2-3 zone or a 3-2 zone, which they couldn't. At times they figured it out when they had Quentin Rose and Jake Forrester on the inside. They were filling gaps and it worked. But he wants guys to be able to understand defenses, understand their own game, and understand their teammates to just play basketball. He doesn't want to have to be on top of guys to be able to say, like, run XYZ play. He wants them to be like, run this general offense, but just play basketball with each other and kind of know what to do out on the court. And I think he'd rather focus on other facets of his team's game or mold these players to be able to play basketball rather than make them robots.
Graham,
yeah, not much. No, I was gonna say I can't really add much to that. That was really well said. I would say that those kind of teams that do have the trust in your players to kind of just be able to go out and play basketball and create these plays on their own are teams that kind of do well toward tournament time, because they have that trust in each other. They understand how it works. They don't need to call a timeout right before a big possession. And I think having that positionless basketball, and that's something that would really work well for Temple. Jaleel White's an interesting name you brought up, John, because I feel like he's someone who is long, who is athletic, who doesn't have a great jump shot, but can really work on that and can really start to shoot from everywhere. That's really important. And while a lot of fans think that this might be something that is kind of straying from the norm or even taking Temple backwards, I really do think it's on the cutting edge of what college basketball is going to look like in the next few years.
One more thing I'd add, and Graham and I had this conversation a while back towards the beginning of the season about like what can work for Temple. And one thing we talked about is the thing that wins in college basketball is shooters and senior point guards. And that is solely based on the fact that shooters can do things in when things go wrong. A good shooter can bail out an offense. And senior point guards are pass first and understand their teammates and understand the floor and understand how to read a defense. And they're essentially a quarterback. Those two things win in college basketball right now because they have that understanding and because they can just play basketball. And that's not to say that they need a senior point guard this coming year. That's more to say they need guys that can understand how to play with each other.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've talked about it so many times before. I mean, a lot of times, and I get the complaint, Temple gets off to a good start and then they slump. And then obviously fans have a right to be upset when their team loses, when they start scanning the roster and saying, well, Aaron inherited a roster that for the most part got to the tournament last year. And again, we talked about before, Shiz Alston's with the Blue Coats. He's not in the NBA right now, but, he bailed them out of a lot of situations, even if it was just the other team knows that a ball screen's coming. He's coming off the screen, but he would hit. And Shiz, I love him to death. He's not even the most athletic guy in the world where he can just break somebody down and do whatever he wants, but he could kind of hit a fadeaway shot, even after playing 32, 35 minutes. They didn't have that this year. They didn't have that shooter to bail them out, and you saw just how much of a difference it made at the end of the day.
I'll just add the last thing, not to say Aaron McKie doesn't want, like every college team, every basketball team at any level is going to have sets for a quick play that they're going to run. But sure. I think that he would more prefer, and we've talked about this, to have long athletic guys that can run the floor because, I mean, it's been the same for the past couple of years. They don't want to play half-court sets. When you don't have a true point guard or a guy like, that can really make things happen off the dribble like Shiz Alston was, it's tougher to play that style and half-court brand of basketball. So what he wants to do is he wants to run the floor, and he wants guys to be able to be comfortable with the ball in their hands and to make plays.
Gentlemen, great stuff. A big thank you to Ari Rosenfeld for joining us this week. Always great to talk basketball with him. Thank you to all of you for listening. Again, as I always say every week, hope you're all staying safe, happy, and healthy out there. Take care of yourselves. We will have another podcast for you next week. And thanks for tuning in. And I will talk to you soon. We'll talk to you soon, not just me. We'll all talk to you soon. I feel like that was a Ron Burgundy sign up. Stay calm. I'm going to slip that in at the end. So thank you, everybody. We will talk to you next week.